Pay attention now. There is something most men spend years trying to understand, yet they keep getting it wrong. They believe that if they give more, do more, sacrifice more, they will be valued more. But reality doesn't work that way. Not in relationships. Not in attraction. Not in life. A man once said, "I gave her everything, and still lost her." But the truth is, he didn't lose her at the end. He lost her the moment he abandoned himself. This is where Stoicism teaches a hard but powerful lesson. People are not loyal to your effort. They are loyal to how you make them feel about themselves, and more importantly, how you carry yourself. There was a young man named Daniel. Daniel believed love was about giving endlessly. He would cancel his plans, ignore his goals, and always put his partner first. At first, she appreciated it. She smiled more. She stayed close. But slowly, something changed. She stopped respecting him. Daniel didn't understand. He thought, "If I do more, she'll love me more." So he tried harder. More gifts. More attention. More sacrifices. But instead of bringing her closer, it pushed her away. One day she left. And Daniel was left with confusion, heartbreak, and one painful question. Why wasn't I enough? Here's the truth most people won't tell you. People are not loyal to what you do for them. They are loyal to what they feel when they are with you. And those feelings don't come from desperation, overgiving, or losing your identity. They come from strength, self-respect, and purpose. When you make someone the center of your world, they stop seeing you as valuable. But when you have your own world, and they are invited into it, they begin to value your presence. This is not manipulation. This is human nature. Stoic philosophy teaches us something deeper. You cannot control how someone feels about you. You cannot control whether they stay or leave. But you can control who you are. And that is where your power lies. Marcus Aurelius once wrote about focusing only on what is within your control. Your actions. Your thoughts. Your discipline. Your standards. When you abandon these for someone else, you lose the very thing that made you attractive in the first place. Let's go back to Daniel. After months of pain, he decided to change. Not for her, but for himself. He stopped chasing. He stopped over-explaining. He stopped trying to prove his worth. Instead, he started building himself. He worked on his goals. He improved his mindset. He became someone who respected his own time. And something unexpected happened. People started noticing him differently. Not because he was doing more for them, but because he was doing more for himself. This is the shift. When you stop seeking validation, you become valuable. When you stop chasing attention, you attract it. When you stop losing yourself, you become someone worth finding. And suddenly, relationships feel different. You're no longer trying to hold someone. You're simply choosing whether they deserve a place in your life. But let's be clear. This isn't about blaming women. This is about understanding dynamics. Everyone, men and women alike, is drawn to strength, confidence, and self-respect. When those disappear, attraction fades. Not because someone is evil or heartless, but because human nature responds to energy, not effort. So what is the one thing people are loyal to? They are loyal to how you make them feel, and even deeper, they are loyal to value. And value comes from self-respect, emotional control, purpose, boundaries. Not from endless giving. Imagine two men. One is always available, always agreeing, always sacrificing. The other has standards, a vision, and a life he's building. Which one feels more valuable? Which one feels more respected? The answer is obvious. Now, this doesn't mean you shouldn't care. It doesn't mean you shouldn't give. It means you should never give at the cost of yourself. Because the moment you lose yourself trying to keep someone, you've already lost everything. Here's something powerful to remember. The right person doesn't require you to become less. They naturally align with who you already are. And if someone only values you when you overextend yourself, that's not loyalty. That's convenience. So the real question is not, How do I make someone stay? The real question is, am I someone worth staying for, to myself? Because when you answer that honestly, everything changes. Daniel learned this the hard way. Months later, his ex reached out. But this time, he didn't rush. He didn't chase. He didn't need her to complete him. He had already become complete. And for the first time in his life, he had the power to choose. This is the Stoic way. You don't beg for attention. You don't chase validation. You don't lose yourself for love. You become strong. You become grounded. You become someone who doesn't need to be chosen, because you choose yourself first. If you've ever felt overlooked, unappreciated, or confused in relationships, understand this. It's not about doing more. It's about becoming more. And that journey starts with you. There's a moment in every man's life when reality hits harder than emotion. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But quietly, like a truth you can't ignore anymore. It usually comes after disappointment. After confusion. After giving your best and still feeling like it wasn't enough. And in that silence, you start asking questions you avoided before. Why did I lose myself? Why did I try so hard for someone who barely tried for me? Why did I believe that doing more would make me more valuable? That's where growth begins. Most people are taught the wrong idea about relationships. They're told love is about sacrifice. About proving yourself. About showing how much you care by how much you give. But no one tells you the limit. No one tells you that if you give without balance, you don't become loved. You become taken for granted. Think about it. When something is always available, always predictable, always giving, it slowly loses its perceived value. Not because it's useless, but because it's no longer respected. And this applies to everything in life. Time, energy, attention. If you give them away without boundaries, people stop appreciating them. There's a deeper layer to this. People are not just responding to what you do. They are responding to what your actions say about you. When you constantly chase, it doesn't communicate love. It communicates dependence. When you constantly overgive, it doesn't communicate strength. It communicates insecurity. And when you abandon your own purpose for someone else, it communicates that you don't value your own life. This is why Stoicism emphasizes inner control. Because when your emotions control your actions, you lose direction. But when your principles guide your behavior, you become stable, and stability is rare. And what is rare becomes valuable. Let's go deeper into Daniel's story. After his transformation began, it wasn't easy. There were nights he still thought about her. Moments he wanted to text her. Times he questioned if he was doing the right thing. But instead of acting on impulse, he paused. He learned to sit with discomfort. That's something most people can't do. Discomfort is where most people break. They run back to what hurt them, just to avoid feeling alone. But Daniel didn't. He stayed. He stayed in the silence. He stayed in the uncertainty. He stayed in the process of becoming stronger. And slowly, something changed inside him. He stopped needing external validation. He stopped checking his phone for messages. He stopped measuring his worth by someone else's attention. And for the first time, he felt free. Freedom is not about having everything. It's about not needing anything that costs you your peace. Read that again. Because that's where power comes from. Now imagine living like that. Imagine waking up and your mood isn't controlled by someone else. Imagine focusing on your goals without distraction. Imagine walking into any situation knowing you are enough as you are. That confidence cannot be faked. It comes from discipline. From self-respect. From choosing growth over comfort again and again. Here's something most people don't realize. Attraction is not built on effort alone. It's built on perception. And perception is shaped by how you carry yourself. A man who is constantly trying to impress is seen differently from a man who is simply expressing who he is. One seeks approval. The other commands respect. And people can feel that difference instantly. So what should you do instead? Focus on becoming someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Build your life. Build your mindset. Build your standards. Because when your life has direction, you stop revolving around people who don't. Let's talk about boundaries. Because this is where most people struggle. They think boundaries push people away. But in reality, boundaries protect your value. When you say no to things that don't align with you, you say yes to your growth. When you walk away from disrespect, you teach people how to treat you. And when you stop tolerating less, you start attracting better. Daniel learned this too. The next time someone entered his life, things were different. He didn't rush. He didn't overinvest. He observed. He paid attention to actions, not words. And most importantly, he stayed himself. And because of that, the dynamic changed. There was respect. There was balance. There was mutual effort. Not because he forced it, but because he no longer accepted anything less. This is the real transformation. It's not about changing others. It's about changing your standards. When your standards rise, your environment changes. The people you tolerate change. The situations you accept change. The way you see yourself changes. And that shift affects every part of your life. But let's be honest. Not everyone will like the new you. Some people will feel uncomfortable. Because they benefited from the old you. The one who overgave. The one who stayed silent. The one who accepted less. And when you change, you remove that access. That's why growth can feel lonely. But it's a necessary loneliness. Because it creates space for the right people to enter. Now let's return to the core message. People are loyal to value. And value is not what you give. It's who you are. If you are constantly available, constantly chasing, constantly proving, you reduce your own value. But if you are focused, grounded, and selective, you increase it naturally. This is not a game. This is not manipulation. This is alignment with reality. And once you understand this, you stop asking for attention. You start commanding respect. Before we close, remember this story? A man once chased a butterfly everywhere. He ran after it, tried to catch it, exhausted himself, but it always escaped. Then one day, he stopped chasing. He sat down and focused on building a beautiful garden. And as time passed, the butterfly came to him. That's how life works. Stop chasing. Start building. There is a quiet shift that happens when a man finally understands his value. It doesn't come with noise. It doesn't come with applause. It comes with silence and clarity. The kind of clarity that makes you look back at your past self and realize how much you tolerated. Not because you were weak, but because you didn't know better. Most people don't lose others because they didn't give enough. They lose others because they gave without direction. There is a difference. Giving with purpose builds connection. Giving without boundaries creates imbalance. And imbalance always collapses. You have to understand something that changes everything. Respect comes before loyalty. Not the other way around. If someone doesn't respect you, they cannot stay loyal to you, no matter how much you do for them. And respect doesn't come from pleasing people. It comes from standing firm in who you are. There's a dangerous habit many people develop. They confuse attention with affection. They think because someone talks to them often, it means something deep. They think because someone stays around, it means they care. But presence without respect is just convenience. And convenience disappears the moment something better appears. This is why you must build something within yourself that cannot be replaced. Your mindset. Your discipline. Your focus. Your standards. Because when those are strong, you don't compete. You stand apart. Let's talk about emotional control. Because this is where most people lose their power. When your emotions dictate your actions, you become predictable. And when you become predictable, you become easy to overlook. But when you learn to pause, to think, to respond instead of react, you create mystery. And mystery creates attraction. Think about it. The man who reacts to everything immediately versus the man who observes, processes, and then responds calmly. Which one feels stronger? Which one feels more grounded? Which one feels like he has control over his life? Control is attractive. Not control over others, but control over yourself. This is why Stoicism is so powerful. It teaches you to separate what you feel from what you do, because feelings are temporary, but actions create consequences. There's another layer most people ignore. Self-respect is visible. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to explain it. People can feel it in how you speak, in what you tolerate, in what you walk away from. And the moment you start walking away from what doesn't serve you, you change your entire reality. Let's go deeper into something uncomfortable. Many people are not afraid of losing others. They are afraid of being alone. And because of that fear, they settle. They overgive. They overstay. They overexplain. But here's the truth. Being alone is not the worst thing. Being with the wrong person while losing yourself is far worse. Solitude builds strength. It forces you to face yourself, to understand your thoughts, to rebuild your identity without external noise. And once you become comfortable alone, you become dangerous in the best way possible. Because now you choose people. You don't need them. This is where real attraction begins. When your presence is a choice, not a requirement. Let's return to Daniel one last time. Months turned into a year. And the man he became was unrecognizable from who he used to be. Not because he tried to impress anyone, but because he focused on himself relentlessly. He no longer chased conversations. He no longer feared silence. He no longer questioned his worth. And something interesting happened. The same type of people who once overlooked him now noticed him. But this time, he noticed the difference too. He saw who was genuine, who was consistent, who truly aligned with his life. And for the first time, he didn't rush. That patience is power. Because rushing is often driven by fear. But patience is driven by confidence. Confidence says, I know my value. I don't need to prove it. And when you truly believe that, everything changes. Now here's the final truth most people avoid. The way people treat you is often a reflection of what you allow. If you accept less, you receive less. If you demand respect, not with words but with actions, you attract it. So the question becomes simple. What are you allowing? What are you tolerating? What are you accepting that you know you shouldn't? Because the moment you raise your standards, you raise your life. And yes, it may cost you people, but it will also reveal who truly belongs. Remember this. You are not here to convince anyone to stay. You are here to become someone who doesn't need convincing. And once you reach that level, you don't chase. You don't beg. You don't lose yourself. You stand. Strong. Grounded. Unshaken. And from that place, the right people don't feel pressured to stay. They choose to. If you've made it this far, then you're not like most people. You're someone who is ready to grow. To think differently. To move differently. There comes a moment in life when everything you believed about effort, love, and loyalty begins to fall apart. Not because you were foolish, but because you were taught a version of reality that doesn't fully exist. You were told that if you give more, care more, sacrifice more, then you will be valued more. But experience eventually shows you something different. It shows you that people don't always respond to effort the way you expect. And that realization can either break you, or rebuild you into someone far stronger than before. The truth is simple, but not easy to accept. People are not loyal to what you do for them alone. They are loyal to the value they feel in your presence, and the respect they have for you. And respect doesn't come from losing yourself. It doesn't come from constantly proving your worth. It comes from standing firm in who you are, even when it's uncomfortable. Because when you abandon yourself trying to keep someone else, you create an imbalance that slowly erodes attraction, connection, and meaning. There was a time when you believed that being available all the time was a good thing. That replying instantly, showing constant attention, and putting someone first would make them appreciate you more. But over time, you may have noticed something strange. The more available you became, the less valued you felt. The more you tried to prove your importance, the less important you seemed in their eyes. And that confusion leads many people into a cycle of overgiving, hoping that one more effort will finally make the difference. But it never does. Because the issue was never about doing more. It was about understanding the deeper dynamic at play. Human nature does not reward desperation. It responds to confidence, stability, and self-respect. When you carry yourself with purpose, when you have a life outside of someone else, when your happiness is not dependent on their presence, something changes. The energy shifts. The way people perceive you shifts. And suddenly, you are no longer chasing, you are attracting. Think about a time when you met someone who seemed completely comfortable in themselves. They weren't trying too hard. They weren't seeking approval. They simply existed with a quiet confidence that made them stand out. That presence is powerful because it is rare. Most people are trying to be liked. Very few are focused on being real. And authenticity, combined with self-respect, creates a level of attraction that effort alone can never achieve. Let's go back to the story of Daniel, because his journey reflects what many go through. After losing someone he thought he needed, he entered a phase of deep reflection. At first, it was painful. He questioned everything. He replayed conversations in his mind. He wondered what he could have done differently. But slowly, those questions turned inward. Instead of asking why she left, he started asking why he lost himself in the process. That question changed everything. Because it shifted his focus from external validation to internal growth. He began to rebuild his life piece by piece. Not for anyone else, but for himself. He set goals. He developed discipline. He spent time alone, not as a punishment, but as a way to reconnect with who he really was. And in that solitude, he discovered something most people never do. He realized that his worth was never dependent on someone else's presence. As time passed, Daniel became stronger, not just physically or financially, but mentally. He no longer reacted impulsively. He no longer felt the need to chase or convince. He became selective. He observed more. He spoke less, but with more intention. And that shift in behavior created a completely different experience in his interactions. People began to treat him differently, not because he demanded it, but because he embodied it. This is where many people misunderstand attraction. They think it is about doing the right things at the right time. But it is actually about becoming the kind of person who naturally creates the right response. When you build yourself into someone who is grounded, focused, and self-respecting, you don't have to force anything. The right dynamics form on their own. And the wrong ones fade away without resistance. There is also a powerful lesson in learning to walk away. Not in anger, not in ego, but in clarity. Walking away from situations that don't align with your values is one of the strongest things you can do. It shows that you value your peace more than temporary connection. And while it may feel difficult in the moment, it builds a foundation of self-respect that will shape every future interaction in your life. Many people stay where they are not valued because they fear starting over. They fear the unknown. They fear being alone. But what they don't realize is that staying in the wrong situation costs far more than leaving it. It drains your energy. It weakens your confidence. It slowly convinces you that less is all you deserve. And that belief is far more dangerous than any temporary loneliness. When you finally break free from that mindset, everything changes. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop accepting inconsistent behavior. You stop making excuses for people who don't show up for you. And in that space, you begin to attract something different. Not because you are searching for it, but because you are aligned with it. The Stoic mindset teaches you to focus only on what you can control. Your actions. Your thoughts. Your responses. And when you fully embrace that, you stop wasting energy trying to control how others feel about you. Instead, you direct that energy into becoming better every day. And that consistency builds a level of confidence that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. There is a quiet power in becoming someone who does not need constant validation. Someone who can sit in silence without feeling uncomfortable. Someone who can walk into any room without needing approval. That kind of presence is not built overnight. It is developed through discipline, through self-awareness, and through the willingness to grow even when it is difficult. And when you reach that level, relationships no longer feel like a struggle. They feel like a choice. You are no longer trying to hold on to someone who is uncertain. You are choosing whether they align with your life. And that shift changes everything. Because now, your energy is not based on fear. It is based on confidence. There is something powerful that happens when you finally stop trying to be everything for everyone and instead decide to become everything for yourself. It feels unfamiliar at first, almost uncomfortable, because you are breaking a pattern that has been part of your life for so long. You were used to seeking approval, adjusting your behavior, and overextending your energy just to maintain connections. But when that cycle ends, you begin to see clearly. You realize how much of your time and effort was spent trying to secure something that should have been natural. And in that realization, you begin to reclaim your power, not in a loud or aggressive way, but in a calm, grounded presence that cannot be easily shaken. At first, people around you may not understand the change. They may notice that you are no longer as available as before, no longer as reactive, and no longer as eager to please. Some may even question you or try to pull you back into your old habits. But this is part of the process. Growth often creates distance between who you were and who you are becoming. It forces you to let go of patterns that once felt comfortable but no longer serve you. And while it may feel lonely at times, that loneliness is not emptiness. It is space. Space for clarity, for strength, and for a new version of yourself to take shape without interference. As you continue on this path, you begin to notice subtle changes in your mindset. You stop overthinking every interaction. You stop analyzing every message or silence. Instead, you become more present, more focused on your own direction rather than someone else's reactions. This shift is important because it removes the emotional weight that once controlled your decisions. You are no longer acting out of fear or insecurity. You are acting out of intention. And when your actions are intentional, they carry a different kind of energy, one that is steady, confident, and difficult to ignore. There is also a deeper understanding that begins to form within you. You start to recognize that not every connection is meant to last, and not every person is meant to stay in your life. This is not a negative realization. It is a freeing one. Because it allows you to release the pressure of trying to make everything work. It allows you to accept that some people are only meant to be part of your journey for a certain period of time. And once their role is complete, holding on only creates unnecessary pain. Letting go, on the other hand, creates space for something better aligned with who you are becoming. One of the most important lessons you will learn is the difference between genuine connection and temporary attention. Attention can be loud, exciting, and immediate, but it is often inconsistent and short-lived. Genuine connection, however, is steady, respectful, and built over time. It does not require you to prove your worth repeatedly. It does not leave you feeling uncertain or drained. And once you experience that difference, you will never settle for less again. Because you will understand that your energy is too valuable to be spent on something that does not bring stability and growth into your life. As your self-respect grows, so does your ability to set boundaries without guilt. You begin to say no when something does not align with your values. You begin to walk away from situations that feel one-sided or disrespectful. And most importantly, you begin to prioritize your peace over temporary satisfaction. This is not selfish. It is necessary. Because without boundaries, you lose yourself. And once you lose yourself, no external connection can truly fulfill you. But when you protect your energy, you create a foundation that supports both your personal growth and your relationships. There will still be moments of doubt. Moments where you question if you are doing the right thing. Moments where the old habits try to return. This is normal. Growth is not a straight path. It is a process of constant adjustment and learning. But the difference now is that you are aware. You recognize those patterns when they appear. And instead of falling back into them, you pause. You reflect. And you choose differently. That ability to choose, to act consciously rather than react emotionally, is what separates who you were from who you are becoming. Over time, your confidence becomes more stable. It is no longer dependent on external validation or temporary success. It comes from within, from the knowledge that you are building something meaningful in your life. You trust yourself more. You rely on your own judgment. And that trust creates a sense of calm that influences every area of your life. Whether in relationships, work, or personal challenges, you approach situations with a level of composure that was not there before. And that composure becomes one of your greatest strengths. People will start to notice this change, even if they cannot fully explain it. They will see the difference in how you carry yourself, in how you speak, and in how you respond to situations. Some will be drawn to it. Others may feel uncomfortable around it. But either way, it creates a shift in your interactions. You are no longer treated the same way because you are no longer the same person. And this is where your growth begins to influence your environment, shaping the kind of connections and opportunities that come into your life. At this stage, you begin to understand that your life is not about chasing people or proving your worth. It is about building something that reflects who you truly are. It is about creating a life that feels fulfilling on its own, regardless of who is part of it. And when you reach that point, relationships become an addition, not a necessity. They enhance your life, but they do not define it. And that balance is what allows you to experience connection without losing your sense of self. There comes a stage in your growth where you begin to see patterns you once ignored, and those patterns start to explain everything that confused you in the past. You realize that it was never about doing more or giving more, but about understanding the value of your presence. When you constantly tried to prove yourself, you unknowingly lowered your own worth because you were acting from a place of need rather than strength. And people can sense that, even if they don't say it directly. They respond to the energy behind your actions, not just the actions themselves. Once you understand this, you begin to move differently, not because you want to impress anyone, but because you finally respect yourself enough to stop chasing validation. As this awareness grows, you start to detach from outcomes that once controlled your emotions. You no longer feel the urge to force connections or hold on to situations that feel uncertain. Instead, you observe more and react less. This shift may seem small, but it changes everything about how people perceive you. When you are no longer easily affected, you appear stronger, more grounded, and more in control. And that sense of control is something people naturally respect. It creates a presence that doesn't beg for attention but attracts it without effort. This is the difference between someone who is trying to be chosen and someone who has already chosen themselves. There is also a moment where you begin to understand that not every loss is a failure, and not every ending is something to be avoided. Some endings are necessary because they remove what no longer aligns with your growth. When you hold on to something that is not meant for you, you delay your own progress. But when you learn to let go with clarity instead of resistance, you create space for something better to enter your life. This is not about replacing people or situations quickly, but about trusting that your journey is moving in the right direction, even when it feels uncertain. With time, your focus shifts away from external validation and toward internal development. You begin to invest more in your mindset, your discipline, and your purpose. These are the things that build a lasting sense of confidence, the kind that doesn't fade when circumstances change. You start to realize that true confidence is not loud or aggressive. It is quiet, steady, and rooted in self-awareness. It comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for, and not allowing temporary emotions or opinions to shake that foundation. As your foundation becomes stronger, your interactions with others begin to change in noticeable ways. You communicate more clearly, you listen more carefully, and you no longer feel the need to over-explain yourself. This simplicity in your behavior creates a sense of calm that others can feel. It removes unnecessary tension and allows your presence to speak for itself. And when your presence is strong enough, you don't need to convince anyone of your value. It becomes evident in the way you carry yourself and the way you handle situations. There is also a deeper level of peace that comes from no longer needing constant reassurance. You stop looking for signs, signals, or confirmation from others to feel secure. Instead, you build that security within yourself. This internal stability allows you to navigate relationships with a clear mind rather than an anxious one. You no longer overanalyze every detail or create problems that don't exist. You simply observe what is real and respond accordingly. And that clarity prevents you from getting lost in situations that once drained your energy. At this point, you begin to understand that your time and energy are your most valuable assets. You become more selective about where you invest them, and you no longer waste them on things that don't contribute to your growth. This selectiveness is not about being distant or unavailable, but about being intentional. It means you choose quality over quantity in your connections, and you prioritize depth over surface-level interactions. And this shift naturally filters out people and situations that don't align with your standards. As you continue to grow, you develop a stronger sense of independence. You no longer rely on others to define your happiness or direction. You create your own goals, your own routines, and your own sense of fulfillment. This independence is not about isolating yourself, but about building a life that stands on its own. And when your life is stable and meaningful on its own, any relationship you enter becomes a choice rather than a necessity. That difference changes the entire dynamic of how you connect with others. There will always be challenges along the way, but the way you handle them will be different. Instead of reacting emotionally, you approach them with a sense of calm and perspective. You understand that setbacks are part of the process, not the end of it. And this mindset allows you to move forward without losing momentum. It keeps you focused on your long-term growth rather than short-term discomfort. And that consistency is what builds real strength over time. Eventually, you reach a point where you no longer feel the need to explain your journey to others. You are comfortable with your path, even if it looks different from what others expect. You trust your decisions, and you accept the outcomes that come with them. This level of self-trust is rare, but it is one of the most valuable things you can develop. Because when you trust yourself, you stop seeking approval from those who don't understand your vision. There is a point in your journey where you stop reacting to everything that once disturbed your peace, and in that moment, you begin to understand the true meaning of control. Not control over people, not control over outcomes, but control over yourself. This kind of control is quiet, almost invisible, but incredibly powerful. It shows in how you respond instead of react, how you observe instead of assume, and how you walk away instead of holding on. When you reach this level, your energy changes. You are no longer easily shaken, and that stability becomes one of your greatest strengths. People may not always understand it, but they will feel it, and that feeling creates a level of respect that cannot be forced. As you grow into this mindset, you start to notice how much of your past behavior was driven by fear rather than clarity. Fear of losing someone, fear of being alone, fear of not being enough. These fears often push people into actions that don't reflect their true value. They overextend themselves, they tolerate disrespect, and they remain in situations that slowly drain them. But once you become aware of these patterns, you gain the ability to change them. Awareness gives you choice, and choice gives you power. You are no longer operating on autopilot. You are making decisions consciously, based on what aligns with your growth rather than what temporarily satisfies your emotions. There is also a shift in how you view rejection and distance. What once felt like a personal failure begins to look like a natural redirection. You start to understand that not everything is meant to work, and that is not something to resist. Instead, it is something to accept and learn from. When you stop taking every outcome personally, you free yourself from unnecessary emotional weight. You begin to see situations more objectively, which allows you to respond with clarity rather than confusion. This perspective not only protects your peace but also helps you move forward without carrying the burden of past disappointments. With this new perspective, your priorities begin to change. You no longer focus on being liked by everyone. Instead, you focus on being respected by the right people. This difference may seem subtle, but it has a significant impact on your life. Being liked often requires compromise and adjustment, while being respected requires consistency and integrity. When you choose respect over approval, you naturally filter out situations and people that don't align with your values. This creates a more stable and fulfilling environment, where your energy is invested in things that truly matter. Another important realization is that your time is limited, and how you spend it determines the direction of your life. When you were focused on external validation, much of your time was spent trying to maintain connections or gain approval. But as you grow, you begin to redirect that time toward your own development. You invest in your goals, your skills, and your mindset. This investment pays off in ways that go beyond immediate results. It builds a foundation that supports long-term growth and stability. And as this foundation becomes stronger, your confidence grows with it, creating a cycle of continuous improvement. As your confidence becomes more stable, you also become more patient. You no longer feel the need to rush into situations or force outcomes. You understand that meaningful things take time, and you are willing to wait for what aligns with your values. This patience is not passive. It is active and intentional. It allows you to make better decisions, avoid unnecessary mistakes, and maintain a sense of control over your life. And in a world where most people are rushing, your ability to remain calm and composed sets you apart. There is also a deeper sense of satisfaction that comes from living in alignment with your principles. When your actions reflect your values, you experience a level of clarity that removes internal conflict. You are no longer questioning your decisions or second-guessing your direction. You know why you do what you do, and that understanding gives you confidence. It allows you to move forward with purpose, even when the path is not easy. And that sense of purpose becomes a guiding force that keeps you focused and motivated. Over time, your relationships begin to reflect this internal growth. You attract people who respect your boundaries, appreciate your presence, and contribute positively to your life. This doesn't happen by chance. It happens because you have changed the way you present yourself and the standards you uphold. You no longer accept behavior that contradicts your values, and this naturally filters out unhealthy dynamics. The connections you build become more meaningful, more balanced, and more supportive of your growth. There will always be moments where you are tested, where situations challenge your progress and push you toward old habits. But the difference now is that you are aware of these patterns. You recognize them, and you have the ability to choose a different response. This doesn't mean you will always get it right, but it means you are moving in the right direction. Growth is not about perfection. It is about progress. And every time you choose growth over comfort, you strengthen your mindset and move closer to the person you want to become. Eventually, you reach a point where your life is no longer centered around external factors. You are not defined by someone else's opinion, attention, or presence. You are defined by your actions, your values, and your commitment to growth. This independence creates a sense of freedom that cannot be taken away. It allows you to navigate life with confidence, knowing that your stability comes from within. And that internal stability becomes the foundation for everything you build moving forward. There is a moment in your life when you finally get tired, not physically, but mentally, from trying to be understood by people who are never really trying to understand you. It's a quiet kind of exhaustion, the kind that doesn't show on the outside but slowly builds within you over time. You start to notice how much energy you've been giving away, how often you've explained yourself, and how many times you've lowered your standards just to keep peace. And in that moment, something inside you shifts. You begin to realize that constantly adjusting yourself to fit into someone else's expectations is not strength, it's a slow form of self-abandonment. That realization doesn't make you bitter, it makes you aware, and awareness is where real change begins. Once that awareness takes hold, your perspective starts to evolve in ways you didn't expect. You begin to see situations more clearly, without the emotional fog that once clouded your judgment. Things that once confused you now make sense, and patterns that once repeated themselves become obvious. You notice how certain behaviors always lead to the same outcomes, and you start to question why you allowed them for so long. This is not about blaming yourself, but about taking responsibility for your growth. Because when you take responsibility, you gain control. And control over your decisions is what ultimately shapes the direction of your life. As you continue to grow, you begin to understand that not every connection deserves your full energy. In the past, you may have treated every relationship as something that needed to be maintained at all costs. But now, you see the difference between something that adds value to your life and something that simply occupies your time. This distinction is powerful because it allows you to invest your energy more wisely. You stop pouring into situations that drain you, and you start focusing on those that support your growth. And in doing so, you create a life that feels more balanced, more intentional, and more aligned with who you are becoming. There is also a shift in how you respond to distance and silence. Where you once felt the need to fill every gap with words or actions, you now understand the strength in doing nothing. You realize that not every silence needs to be broken, and not every distance needs to be closed. Sometimes the best response is to step back and observe. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you respect yourself enough to not chase what is not meeting you halfway. And that restraint, that ability to hold your position without reacting impulsively, becomes one of your most powerful traits. Over time, your self-worth becomes less dependent on how others treat you and more rooted in how you treat yourself. You begin to set standards, not based on what others expect, but based on what you know you deserve. These standards are not about being demanding or difficult. They are about being clear. Clear about what you accept, what you reject, and what you are no longer willing to tolerate. And once those standards are in place, your life begins to reflect them. You attract different people, different opportunities, and different experiences, all because you made the decision to value yourself first. There is something deeply empowering about realizing that you are not responsible for how others feel about you. You are responsible for your actions, your intentions, and your behavior, but not for someone else's perception. This understanding frees you from the constant need to please, impress, or convince. It allows you to show up as you are, without fear of being misunderstood. And while not everyone will appreciate that, the right people will. They will recognize your authenticity and respect your presence, not because you tried to earn it, but because you naturally embody it. As your mindset continues to evolve, you begin to prioritize peace over excitement. You start to see that not everything that feels intense is meaningful, and not everything that is calm is boring. In fact, the most stable and fulfilling experiences in life often come from consistency, not chaos. This shift in perspective changes the way you approach relationships, goals, and even challenges. You become less attracted to drama and more focused on stability. And that focus creates a life that feels more grounded and sustainable over time. There will still be moments where you are tested, where old habits try to pull you back into familiar patterns. But the difference now is that you recognize those patterns. You see them for what they are, and you have the ability to choose a different response. This doesn't mean the temptation disappears, but it means you are no longer controlled by it. You are aware, and that awareness gives you the power to act in alignment with your growth, even when it's difficult. As you continue on this path, you start to feel a sense of independence that is both freeing and empowering. You no longer rely on external validation to feel secure. You create your own sense of fulfillment through your actions, your progress, and your personal development. This independence doesn't isolate you from others. It strengthens your connections by removing the pressure of neediness. You engage with people because you want to, not because you have to. And that shift creates healthier, more balanced relationships. Eventually, you reach a point where your life feels more intentional. You are no longer drifting through situations or reacting to circumstances. You are making conscious decisions, guided by your values and your vision. This sense of direction gives your life meaning and purpose, and it allows you to move forward with confidence. You know where you are going, and even if the path is not always clear, you trust yourself to figure it out. If you've made it this far, it means you are ready to take your growth seriously. You are no longer satisfied with surface-level understanding. You want depth, clarity, and real change. So subscribe to this channel, because this is where you continue that journey. This is where you build the mindset that keeps you strong, focused, and in control of your life. And remember this as you move forward. You don't need to chase what is meant for you. You need to become the person who naturally attracts it. And that process begins the moment you choose yourself, fully and without hesitation. Stay disciplined. Stay focused. Stay strong.